With 3 wins out of 3 under our belt and 3 clean sheets, I as a manager should be very pleased. And I am. But there are still issues within the team and the way we are playing that need to be resolved. Having made tweaks against Southampton, it's opened up new problems, and I need to solve these once and for all. Let's go and kick some balls. Hello and welcome back to FM with Old Man Phil, and in particular to this Aston Villa save. The save in which we are using the information contained in the data hub and the chalkboard to try and maximise our chances this season in the Premier League. And as you can see, we are doing very well at the moment. Things are working out nicely. We've made decisions based on what we've seen prior to the game happening, and we've played 3 and we've won 3. We are the best in terms of goals scored, and we are the best in terms of goals conceded. Now, in the training schedule, I will put in the schedule a match review the day after the match. And here we are on Sunday, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to review how we played. And so my first stop is to the data hub, and I'm going to go straight to the last 5 matches, and it looks good. There is only 1 negative, and we are building up a lot of positives. Final third entries coming from the centre of the pitch. We generally find this, and so I'm not really concerned about that. But if we go back and add Newcastle and West Ham, you can see it's still the same, still pretty much the same. We're performing pretty well, in all honesty, and we are top of the league for a reason. But let's go to our last match now, and we'll go to this first. And you can see we had most of the match momentum. We did allow Southampton into the game at various times, and our XG performance seems to back that up. And then we'll go to the last match passes. Now this is where I'm starting to get a little bit of concern, because I can see that our passes are extremely good in this area in midfield and on the left hand side, pretty good also on the right hand side. Our pass combinations are pretty good, but these two seem to be isolated, and they don't seem to be part of the game. Our striker and the attacking mid are not part of the game, and I want to know why that is. If I go back to Newcastle and I have a look at the last match passes in Newcastle, you can see it was even worse. And we made some tweaks for this game against Southampton, and now it seems to have got better in midfield, but we are still isolating the 2 players up front. I need to find out why that is. A quick look at the opposition last match passes doesn't give me any rise to concern at all. And the opposition goals from inside our penalty area. We've been defending well, and we have kept teams from having chances in or around our box. And so on the surface it looks quite good, but I do need to find out why there is that disconnect between the 2 attacking players and the rest of the team. So my next stop is going to be our last match, and we're going to have a look at the analysis of the 2-0 win against Southampton. You can see we've beaten West Ham 5-0, we then beat Newcastle 1-0, and now we've beaten Southampton 2-0, and I should be happy. But let's have a look at what happened. And you can see that many of our players played extremely well. Only Ollie Watkins with 6.7, and that's the second time that he has not been one of these players. And Matty Cash had a poor game, 6.5. We need to find out what's wrong with him as well as we go through this. But he's actually been playing reasonably well over the 3 games that he's been involved in. So I'm particularly concerned with Ollie Watkins and Onana. Why did they not perform as well as the others? Now, looking at the stats, we had 17 shots. Only 7, though, were on target, but our XG at 2 was just about matching the scoreline. But what I was particularly concerned about is the amount of possession that we had. We only had 47% of the possession, and I'd set the team up to control possession and to control the game through possession, and it clearly didn't work, although our pass completion was 92%. So something is clearly wrong, and I'm going to go to the player statistics first, and I'm going to take a look at Ollie Watkins. Ollie Watkins, 9 passes. He was not involved in the game very much, and only 77% pass completion. And then looking at Onana only completed 85% of his passes. He did, however, have 3 key passes during the game. His tackling, though, however, was not up to scratch, only completing 25% of his tackles. The rest of his game seemed to be fairly decent, and so I'm guessing that it's really all about passing. And so I'm going to go back now and look at the analytical data for the game. And I can clearly see this disconnect between our front players and the midfield and defence. Although we won the game, it's something that I need to work out what is happening. If I go now to the team data, and if I go to passes, I will see perhaps where the problems lie. And if we look at Onana, for example, we can clearly see that he didn't have his best passing day. And we can look at examples of this by just clicking on the event and going to watch highlight. Mings receives the ball and he gives it to Onana, and Onana has space, but his pass is wasteful, and perhaps he's not looking forward enough, and this is perhaps part of the problem. Now, I did look at many of the others, and it was pretty much a similar pattern. The problem with Ollie Watkins appears that he's not getting involved in the game enough. Only 14 passes he received, and that is not good enough. I'd like him to be in the 20s if possible and be much more involved in the game. So I've got problems here in terms of the way we are playing, but it might be that just Onana just had a poor game on the day, but clearly his passing was not good enough on the day. If I go to the teams now, I want to have a look at the average positions. So I'm going to click on the average positions and click on Aston Villa because that's what I'm interested in. And I can see the shape is fairly decent and we seem to have solved the problem of the disconnect in midfield. But I'm wondering why our front players are not getting involved. I want to overlay the heat map on top of that, and we can clearly see that for some reason, maybe because of the distance that the midfield players have to pass, I don't know what it is yet, but clearly the midfielders are choosing to go out wide where the wingers are much more accessible rather than pass through the middle. It's something that really is paining me and is becoming an issue. I'm just going to take that off now and go to the passes and go to the combinations. And yeah, you can clearly see that Watkins is totally isolated. Most of our passing is successful over on the left-hand side, but we still have this great big void that we need to fill. And I think I'm starting to see why this may be occurring. So the next stop is to go to the tactic, and I think I can see what is happening. And if I click on analysis, you'll see that there are gaps. There's a big gap on the left hand side where we have the anchor, and he's not able to cover that ground. So maybe these two players are way too isolated and the midfield find it easier to pass to the wings rather than to pass it forward. And the first thing that I can think of is to decrease the space by lifting the line to much higher. However, we're going to be very vulnerable defensively to teams playing the ball over the top. That really isn't the way to do it for me. I don't want to put our defence at risk where our attack isn't performing really well at the moment. And so I have to look at other options. And other options might be to change the player roles. And so play these midfielders in more advanced positions, and if we say put this one on a segundo volante on attack, we'll keep the anchor. What we're going to find is we've still got that problem, and then perhaps we'll play this one as a defensive midfielder, and if we click on the analysis again, we've still got that. So that isn't going to help. Just changing the roles of the players isn't particularly going to help. And so I really am at a loss of how to solve this. And then it suddenly dawned on me, why don't I move the two midfielders up into central midfield? And now if I click on the analysis, that has gone. However, I'm going to need to be very careful now, because as you can see, I've created now space between our defensive line and the midfield. But we could ask our defensive line to step up more in order to compact the midfield and to stop teams using that space. I don't know what the answer is as yet, but I think that this setup might encourage our players to be in more contact with the front players and to actually pass to them rather than taking what they think is the safer option to the wings who are more accessible to them. I could also then change the role of the attacking midfielder to an advanced playmaker. And one other thing that I would like to do is just play Ollie Watkins as an advanced forward. I don't feel that complete forward is the right role for him, because if we bring up his attributes, you can see that he only has decisions of 10, which really isn't good enough for a Premier League striker. So I want him to do as little as possible. I'm not even going to ask him to roam from position. I just want him to focus on what he does, run at the defence and try to score some goals, because that might also be an issue that's causing problems. If we play him as a complete forward, he's going to be making decisions as to whether to come deep, to go wide, to support players or to attack. I don't think that he's capable of making those decisions, so we're just going to play him as an advanced forward and do what you're best at and try and score goals. And in terms of the roles in midfield, I'm not really sure at this point. We have plenty of time to try and work that out. And we possibly have time now as well, because if you look at our schedule, games coming up include Nottingham Forest, Leicester, Crystal Palace, and someone in the EFL Cup. And I think that gives us plenty of time to experiment. I think these are teams we should be beating, and hopefully we will, and we can experiment at the same time. I also think that I need to have a plan B, and what I need to do, I think, is to turn this into a 4-3-3, because when we play against the bigger teams, our central midfielders are going to be overrun and we need to have a third player in midfield, and I think we will work on that over the coming weeks as well. And so I have some idea now of where I'm going with this, and we have to move forward now in the calendar. And when we get to the Wednesday or Thursday, when the scout reports come in, we will have a look at Nottingham Forest, and then we'll decide how are we going to set up for this game. And so we've arrived at match day, but 2 days before the game, we got all the reports in from our analysts and our scouts, and we went to have a look at Forest. We were going to consider how we were going to line up after we've had a look at the team report. But we're going to go first to the analyst report, because I just want to find out how they are going to set up. And it does seem to me that they are going to start with a 4-2-3-1, as they have started throughout the season. They have used a 5-2-3 and a 4-3-3, but they've never started with those. It's always been a 4-2-3-1. And then the next step is to go to the scout report. And what I pick up from here is that they do have a strong defence. They have Milenkovic at centre-back or right-back, and Moreno, who's very good quality at left-back. But I do know, as an Aston Villa player on loan, he is not going to be available for the next game. I can also see that half of their assists come from just outside the penalty area, and they have a bit of pace. Also further down, that I can see that the assists really are from short passes. I do know that they have impressed going forward against 4-2-3-1, and perhaps we need to be lining up in a different formation. I did say that I wanted to try a 4-3-3, and perhaps now is the time to start experimenting with that with the fixtures that we've got coming up. What I can see from their team report is their marking and their positioning is quite poor. Players with good off the ball would therefore be very useful. They weren't very good at tackling, and their composure and concentration was poor, as well as their decisions and first touch. And I just felt that this might be a good opportunity for us to get stuck into them, for not really in terms of the tackling, but I wanted to get in their face, to be playing in a very aggressive way, despite the fact that we were playing away from home. They didn't have great quality in terms of long shots, but they did have pace, and so therefore by dropping the line to cope with the pace, it wouldn't be a problem, as they don't shoot well from outside of the box. They're not very brave either, so being aggressive towards them would be the best way to go about it, I would think. When I look back at the game that they played against Ipswich, I noticed two things. Moreno was getting up and down this touchline quite a lot, and he did seem to be crossing quite a lot while the winger was coming inside, and everything seemed to be going through a pivot, a central pivot here. There was a lot of play in central midfield, and in that game against Ipswich, Morato was playing as that central pivot. So I had to just check on that, and so the next stop was to go and have a look at how they got on in their last game. I didn't want to look at the Burton game because that was irrelevant. I wanted to look at their last Premier League game, and that was against Ipswich. So I went into the player statistics and I was checking on, in particular, Moreno. And Moreno was quite involved heavily in the game. He had 42 passes, 92% of which were completed, and two key passes. In terms of crossing, he had 11 attempts at crossing, only 9% of which were successful. Morato was very heavily involved in the game, in fact had more passes than any other player. And this is what I seem to be seeing when I watched the game back. It's 61 passes, 90% of which were complete with one key pass. What I did notice is that they were all very short passes, so I wanted to check on that. And was he a dangerous player, or was he just acting as the pivot that I had noticed? And then I wanted to check on Gibbs-White. He was involved in the game, 29 passes, only 79% of them completed. He did cross 12 times at 16% completion, but most of these were cutbacks as far as I could see. So I wanted to go back now and just check in a little bit more detail. So I went into the analytical data now. I went to the teams, and I went to, first of all, I went to passing, and I wanted to see all the combinations for Nottingham Forest. Now, it does seem to me that there's a lot going on down the left-hand side between the centre-back and the full-back, and a lot going on down the right-hand side as well. But what I can see from this is there's a star in the centre of the pitch, and it all revolves around Morato. And he seems to be that little pivot in midfield that everything goes through. So we had to do something with him. And so having cleared that, what I wanted to do then is go and have a look at the average positions. I'm just going to have a look at the overall average positions for Nottingham Forest starting 11. Seems that the wing-backs are not really too high up the pitch, but I do know that Moreno was quite dangerous down the left-hand side, although his crosses didn't seem to connect much. Putting the heat map over the top, we can clearly see now that most of the game was being played through the middle with Morato as the pivot, and everything seemed to be going around him. There was a little bit of play going on down the right, but it's deeper than what Moreno was doing on the left, and we could see from this that Moreno was far more dangerous and using the wings far more dangerous on the left-hand side than they were on the right-hand side. And so I had a pretty clear idea of how they were going to play. And so going to my tactic, I decided that I was not going to use the 4-2-3-1 because we'd already seen that they dealt well with the 4-2-3-1. I'd also mentioned previously that I wanted to try with the 4-3-3 to try to become a little bit more compact in midfield when we were playing the better teams. And now, with the coming 4 fixtures, is a good time to experiment with that. We should be beating all these teams coming up, so why not experiment? So we've put together a little 4-3-3 in order to try and compact the midfield, to put pressure on the two that that they have in midfield. We will possibly have problems down the wings, but in order to combat that, I'm going to play with a standard line. We're going to be very aggressive. We're going to counter-press, counter-attack very quickly. And in possession, I've decided to try and outpass them, to try and keep possession. And I was thinking of focusing our play down the middle to be aggressive with them. But I've decided to leave that blank at the 11th hour. We're going to continue with low crosses and work the ball into the box, but also I have decided to be more expressive, because looking through my team, I found that we have very, very good off the ball. I found that we have players with a lot of flair and good vision. So I want my players to be a little bit more expressive in this game and just see if we can create a lot more chances than we have been doing. Because we are away, I'm going to play balanced, but we are going to play, as I said, with a high press, and we're going to try and be very aggressive and outnumber them in midfield. So knowing how they play, there are certain things that I need to do with the opposition. And so what we've decided to do, Neco Williams, we are just going to turn him onto his weaker foot, and we are going to just close down Ole Einar. We don't really know how he's going to play. I do suspect now that Einar's on the left-hand side, that they're still going to try and focus down that left-hand side. Sangare, we're going to show him onto his weaker foot. Morato isn't playing in this game, but Ryan Yates may be fulfilling that role, so we're going to tight mark Ryan Yates to try to take him out of the game. Jota Silva, a good winger who's very dangerous going outside. We're going to attempt to bring him inside by showing him onto his left foot and hard tackle him. James Ward-Prowse may prove to be very useful for them. We're going to turn him onto his weaker foot and tight mark him. And Callum Hudson-Odoi, we are going to bring him inside as well to stop him crossing and hard tackle him. Awanya, we're going to just turn him onto his weaker left foot. And so that's how we are going to approach the game. We are just going to try and be very aggressive in midfield. We will outnumber them. We will also be pulling them inside so that they're not a threat out on the wings. That's the game plan. And that email, of course, has come in, and it does say that Nottingham Forest are slight underdogs in what should prove to be a tightly contested affair. How tight this will be, only time will tell. I will need to play it again 10 times after we have gone through the game in my mirror save. And so we will be back tomorrow, and we will update you. We will do a full match analysis tomorrow. We're going to have a look if the game plan won, if actually targeting their midfield and being very aggressive with them actually worked, and if forcing them inside because of their lack of finishing from outside of the box actually worked. Did we pull it off, or did it all go wrong? Join us tomorrow when we'll be coming back with a full analysis of what happened in the game. And for now, don't forget to do all that stuff on the screen. You know the drill. And all that remains to be said is take care, be safe, and we'll see you tomorrow for the match analysis.